So it's been a week of Cyberpunk, hasn't it? But Cyberpunk has actually brought up another conversation alongside of it, one that we talked about quite heavily earlier this year, actually, and that had to do with cross-gen, specifically between the Xbox One and the Series X, because Microsoft was very loud about how they're handling cross-gen, whereas Sony was very quiet, very calculated, and they told us about cross-gen like a month before the PS5 came out and a day before the pre-orders went up, so Sony mostly picked their spots, whereas Microsoft just kind of threw the press release out there and just kind of moved along. But I wanted to go back to this topic, mostly because people have now seen how Cyberpunk 2077 runs on the Xbox One and the PS4, and they're not as sure as I guess they were before that things would scale very easily between these systems, and I thought it'd be good to revisit the idea of, is it time to say goodbye to the Xbox One and the PS4 and just fully embrace the PS5 and the Xbox Series X generation right now? Guys, if you enjoyed these videos, make sure the like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So if you missed it, for whatever reason, Cyberpunk 2077 on the PS4 and the Xbox One run terribly. It's not good. The frame rate drops into the teens a lot of times. The resolution's below 720p when you're running around and doing different things. Basically just playing the game then makes it mostly unplayable. It's a first-person shooter, and that kind of frame rate that's not steady, very difficult just to aim and actually play the game. So that alone, people see this and they wonder if it's worth actually moving these kind of games to the Xbox One and the PS4, as a lot of people said, hey, you should have just released it on the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, which we don't even have next-gen versions yet. We're just running it through backwards compatibility. However, on the Series X and the PS5, we are able to get 60 frames per second, which it's not a perfectly locked 60, but it's like way more playable than what we see on last-generation systems. Which, by the way, that's how bad the release for Cyberpunk 2077 was. People are now going back and questioning the idea of cross-generation for the Xbox One and the Series X and the PS4 and the PS5, because remember, Microsoft said about 2 years, so they're thinking they're going to support the Xbox One into 2022, and apparently Jim Ryan said the same thing for the PS4. 2022, that'd be 9 years for the Xbox One and the PS4. That's a pretty good generation, almost a decade long. But will they last that long? Because right now, we've heard from Microsoft, they're going to do something like Halo Infinite, which, I'll be honest, Halo Infinite, they might want to drop that Xbox One. The development has been troubled as it is, and we saw what happened when they just showed the game off and got backlash around that. That leaned into the idea of, yeah, the Xbox One would be holding back the Series X if that's what it looks like right now. Turns out they were just scrambling in the background to get even that demo ready to go, and we now know it's delayed basically until holiday 2021. In holiday 2021, how relevant will the Xbox One VCR really be? See, because for this side, it's one thing if you just have a $500 system and that's it, but we also have a $300 Series S, and the systems keep selling out, so people are obviously moving along from the Xbox One and picking up the next generation system. Microsoft's also made it very easy to upgrade, where like all of your games follow you for the most part on the Xbox. And I also noticed one thing here. Microsoft seems to not necessarily be sticking to like their all cross-gen kind of talk they were doing before. We of course have seen the Medium, but that's a third-party type game. But we did see Flight Simulator coming over, and that's only on the Xbox Series systems. It's not on the Xbox One, which that would have been interesting to see how that would have run. That would have been a Cyberpunk situation on its own, by the way. I can't imagine the Xbox One running a Flight Simulator and it just not looking like a complete potato trying to do it. Now, on the PS4 side, this has actually concerned people when they hear about 2022 for the PS4, because there are certain games that we don't know if it's going to be a PS5 and a PS4 cross-gen title. Forbidden West surprised a lot of people and really started to make people wonder about things like God of War Ragnarok. How sure are we that God of War Ragnarok is only on the PS5? Because there is a chance that Sony tells us like a month or two out, or once they actually show it, little PS4 logo shows up at the bottom there. And people are wondering if that will happen, because will that mean that the PS5 version is compromised? Will it mean that the PS4 version is compromised? That's kind of the way it's being looked at right now. It's, if you put it on both, one of the two is compromised. Either one was held back or one is being stuffed onto the system. And while Cyberpunk 2077 kind of leans into the idea of being stuffed onto a system that can't handle it, I don't necessarily think Cyberpunk 2077 is a great example here. One, because the game itself is like basically broken on all platforms. They've been fixing it as they've gone along, and you don't have to take my word for it. One of the patch notes they released were so many issues when it comes to just being able to play through the game through quest lines that would just break. Like, an NPC would not respond back to you and you cannot complete the quest that you're on right now. Just basic things like that. Crashing. The game crashes a ton on any of these platforms. It seemed on the PS5, it was crashing. One time I had like 3 crashes in a night that I was playing. It was a lot. So Cyberpunk 2077 on its own is very unstable and just not optimized. And the other thing is, first parties like Microsoft and Sony will get more out of the hardware than what CD Projekt Red got, because CD Projekt Red was developing for like 9 different platforms. That included Stadia, by the way. They were developing it completely for Stadia, which apparently it works fine there. So that's interesting that Stadia gets like one of the best versions of it. But for Microsoft and Sony, especially on Sony's side, they're mostly just going to be developing for the PS4, PS4 Pro, and the PS5. So for them, they're very familiar with the hardware. It'd probably be a little easier for them to pull it all off. But people will be disappointed. I'll tell you now, if God of War Ragnarok is on the PS4, there will be a lot of disappointment, I'm sure, online. And it's hard for Sony because they have the PS4 right now with like 120 million customers right there. How do you walk away from that immediately? You got to just flood the market with PS5s and hope that you can get people to upgrade, because you will probably have people who will be on their PS4 in 2022 very easily, right? You might have people in 2023 still on the PS4, still holding out hope for some crazy Black Friday bundle or deal or something, right? Or that one Christmas where like, you know what, I'm going to grab that PS5. It's actually going to happen this year. Sony has the issue of a lot of success, and it sounds weird, but you get to the end of the generation and you don't necessarily want to let it go right away. You do want to develop for both platforms. But for me, I think we can still have some games that are completely cross-gen and not be a big deal. However, I do wonder if some of these big flagship games should absolutely be on both systems. Like God of War, I do think that should be more towards selling PlayStation 5 systems rather than just trying to sell software to the PS4 user base. Also, I mean, that would be a game that would probably get people to jump along pretty quickly to the PS5. And if you have games like Sackboy as an example, or Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is kind of like the almost like the expansion to Spider-Man, if you have those that are also cross-gen alongside of games like Demon's Souls, God of War, Gran Turismo, and Ratchet that are all PS5, I think it can work together to slowly transition over. But like I said, even Microsoft is looking at this with Flight Simulator and saying, well, it's just not going to work. It's only on the Xbox Series system. So big question for me is Halo Infinite. Do you, and you can let me know down in the comments, do you think Halo Infinite will still show up on that Xbox One? Or you think we will find out later on, months before they really start talking about it, let's say mid next year, that there is not going to be an Xbox One version? That's going to be the biggest thing. I think if it is holding things back and making development more and more difficult, it might be time to move on from the Xbox One VCR. Thanks guys for watching. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you next time.